Hi, welcome to Short Bursts. My name is Tony Castronova. This new segment are going to be short clips on tips and maintenance for RC gas model boats. Today we're going to talk about hydraulicking, and let me explain what that means. Hydraulicking in a gas model engine means that an abundant amount of water entered the engine, and it entered it like it would be if it was gasoline, and went up through the transfer ports and got into the combustion chamber. And to hydraulic something is when you try to compress the water and hydro-lock it. And obviously water doesn't compress. And what happens in this case is it can do internal damage to the engine. More commonly in our engines, bending piston rods, connecting rods. Okay. Hydraulicking is something that we really shouldn't experience. There are ways to prevent this or make it very minimal. And the most important way is to run some type of projection device in front of your carburetor, like for instance, like one of our Snozzler 2s. If you're going to have an engine that's exposed, where the carburation is exposed to the air with no hatch cover, or obviously a hatch cover. And we do design boats with hatch covers specifically for this reason. Not only do they look good and represent a real boat, but they keep the abundant amount of water and elements, dirty elements, from easily entering the carburation of the engine. Okay, what takes place here is if your boat was to turn over at a high rate of speed, where the engine was at a high RPM range, let's say 12,000 or a plus, that's a pretty high RPM range. If water was to abruptly enter the carburetor and try to compress, the inertia of the engine spinning as fast as it is would immediately stop and cause damage in most cases. And I've seen this many times with bent rods. And then the byproduct of that is you'll go through the operation to getting your engine ready to go again, to get it running. You'll go out and you'll start it, and it'll start running, and it'll idle real well, and it might even give you a decent mid-range, but you won't achieve a good top end. So you'll come back and you make 10,000 carburetor adjustments, and you still can't get a good top end. And generally what's happened is the rod is bent, and it's changed the timing of the engines. The specific timing that the engine runs. Remember, the piston port function here is your timing. We're going to look at a cutaway right now of the Home Light engine. I'm going to show you exactly what takes place. Okay, remember this engine? We use this in our modification shows. Okay, what has taken place, just as if the gasoline was entering the same way, a large amount of water would flow into the port, come into the crankcase. Immediately when the timing permitted, would go up through the transfers and get into the cylinder, and at this point water would be up there. It would be no different than putting a screwdriver in there, stopping the piston dead. The water cannot compress. The piston stops before it's top dead center. So the amount of force is being applied directly to the piston rod, the connecting rod, and also obviously the bolts that hold the head on. But in the case of Zenoa, for instance, those head bolts, those 4 bolts, do their job, and the blunt is taken to the weakest point, which is the connecting rod, and it bends. Now, what happens is after you start it, when I told you why it ran poorly, is because the timing with this rod bent, obviously the timing is no longer proper. Both exhaust transfer and intake timing are incorrect. And you'll see that the way the engine runs. But worse is once you've ran this engine with a bent rod, it applies an incredible amount of pressure to the lower portion of the cylinder right here, because the rod being bent. And after you run it, it tends to egg shape this area right here. And once you do that, it pretty much renders the cylinder useless. And you'll notice that when you go to remove your cylinder and you can't get it off, because it'll be free movement from here, but at this point here, it'll be oblong, and you'll have to literally force the cylinder off. You might have to put a wooden dowel rod in there, loosen it, and then tap the dowel rod to push the piston out. At that time, the piston and cylinder, and obviously the crankshaft would need to be replaced. With that being said, we really need to avoid this from taking place. So it is vital that you run your boat with a hatch cover or some sort of device over the carburetor to stop that big rush of water from coming in. Because there's really, I kind of tried to come up with ways to test for this if a rod is bent. And it's doable, possibly with a depth indicator, but it bends ever so slightly that it would be very difficult to really see it. And the bottom line is, you guys, let's try not to overturn our boats with carburetors exposed to the water. I mean, under a hatch cover or in a device such as with a device such as a snozzler on there, the odds are in your favor that this won't happen. Okay? Now let's talk about what happens when you do turn over a boat and what we have to do, what your responsibility is to get this thing back in operation. And it is important. It's part of model boating. We go real fast. We can't control that left thumb or the trigger finger. You know, if the boat does 50 miles an hour, we have to do it at all times. And I'm just kidding, but that's what happens. You'll find yourself in a situation maybe where you hit a wave wrong and the boat goes upside down, and obviously you have to go retrieve it. Okay, once you get the boat back, these steps must be followed, because if you do not, you can cause serious damage to the engine. The first thing you want to do is you want to remove, well, first let's talk about the gas tank. If you're running a sealed system, then chances are water didn't enter the tank. But if you're running a system with a cap, screw cap like ours, it's probably a good thing to drain the tank, you know, and remove it, just because if any water does get in the tank, it'll make the engine run really poorly, you know. So let's get the gas out of the tank. The next thing we want to do is we want to remove the spark plug, take the cap off, and unscrew the plug. Okay, I'm going to show it done with the Zenoa. And there's a couple ways we can do this. There's a couple ways. I like to tip the boat upside down, have somebody help you, pull the starter, basically like this, and you'll see the water come out, and there'll be quite a bit of it. You can do this several times. Have a rag handy, okay, so you can get all the water and oil, and gas cleaned up, and do that several times. Now, put fresh gas in the tank, okay, reprime it, get it in the system. Clean your spark plug off, put your spark plug back in. Okay, what is really important here, and make sure you follow this, is remember, water will not compress. If we have a little bit of water still left in the crankcase, it's going to come up with the gasoline. So let's put the plug in finger tight, just finger tight, cap back on, go through our starting procedure. Choke it, you know, get some gas in there. It's not a bad idea to flood it a little bit, then hold your throttle wide open, and then pull it till it starts. You might hear the engine pop, and then it won't start, and you pull it a few more times and you can't get anything. Take the plug out again, okay, and look at the element. Look at the electrode down there. You might see a water droplet between it. If the water droplet's between it, obviously that's what stopped the spark. Blow it off, give it a blow off, maybe pull it a few more times, put a rag over it, put it back in loosely. Now at this time, this engine should start. And there's nothing wrong with starting an engine with the plug loose. There's enough compression to make it fire. But what we've done in this case is any of the residual water left in the block is going to come up through the spark plug threads and come out safely. Start it, let it run a little bit, the loose plug will make a little bit of mess, wipe it off. Once you let it run for 10, 15 seconds, shut it down, tighten your plug, cap it, and you're back and away. Okay, what I showed you is very simple, takes a few minutes, and it pretty much guarantees that you didn't damage your engine. If you were to leave it, the next time you go back, week, 2, 3 weeks from now, there's a good chance, if not 100%, that your bearings on the bottom of the engine or under all your needle bearings could have rust on them. And then you start the engine and you run it, and that rust transfers throughout the engine, and it will damage the engine and render a very expensive engine useless. So it takes a little bit of effort when you flip over, but it's required, and it's part of our hobby. Thank you for watching our small clip, short bursts. My name is Tony Castronovo. Hope you learned something new, and we'll see you next time.